the hours of noon and, 8 p.m. Thank you. All in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. It's now the moment of interruption, and I now call under Rule 5.5, as read earlier today, a resolution put forward by the Honourable Member for Queens that reads, therefore be it resolved that the House commend the Department of Justice on the establishment of the first ever in Nova Scotia domestic violence court, which should begin to address the issue of protecting women against violence in this province. I now recognize the Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand. Thank you. I stand in my place tonight, Madam Speaker, with a heavy heart, but I also stand in my place with an enlightened heart. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest that tonight this is not a debate, that rather this is a continued discussion. It's a discussion to raise awareness, and it's a discussion to ask members for their continued commitment to continue the fight to end violence against women. Madam Speaker, on Monday, May 2nd of 2011, I, along with hundreds of community members, paid respects and said goodbye to Laura Lee Robertson. Laura went missing on April 14th, 2011, and 2 weeks later, her body was found in a wooded area in Bangs Falls, Queens County. Her fiancé was later charged with her murder. Madam Speaker, Laura was a daughter, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, and a friend to many. Laura's death galvanized a community that banded together in support, making posters, putting together a ribbon campaign. And Madam Speaker, I'm wearing a ribbon today with both the colors of yellow and purple. Yellow symbolizing hope and showing support and faith that Laura would be found, and purple to symbolize the need to end and stop violence against women. The community held candlelight vigils. They set up Facebook sites with well over 800 members. They staged a protest walk to end violence against women. Laura's family, Amanda Jones and Tim Robertson and Mother Shirley, showed amazing strength and courage through this most difficult time. Laura's tragedy and meaningless death was broadcast province-wide and beyond. And Laura's family endured the public airing of some of the most intimate details of Laura's life. Madam Speaker, it doesn't matter what side of the tracks one is on. Domestic violence touches many. Many women, including myself, share a common bond, a common thread with women such as Laura, and that thread is one of abuse. A lot of women are able to make change, but many more are not able to make change, and they remain victims of violence. And Laura was one of them. We know, Madam Speaker, that stats show women are more likely to be a victim of spousal abuse. And I'd like to just share a stat from the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the status of women. The rates for spousal violence involving female victims are higher compared to male victims of spousal violence in both Nova Scotia and Canada. According to police-reported data of spousal violence in 2007, approximately 8 out of 10 incidents of spousal violence involves a female victim, both in Nova Scotia and Canada. Madam Speaker, women who are abused or live for years in abusive situations often suffer low self-esteem, lack of confidence, depression. Some turn to alcohol and other substances, to help with and alleviate pain. Women in abusive situation have their health, dignity, and security compromised. They have feelings of helplessness, shame, and unworthiness. Violence against women, Madam Speaker, is unacceptable, and it comes in many forms: emotional and physical abuse, workplace violence, criminal harassment, bullying, intimidation, prostitution, pornography, sexual harassment, and even human rights violations. Madam Speaker, from 2006 to 2011, we have seen the loss and the silencing of many women in our communities, and I want to give names to some of those faces. January 2006, prominent healthcare professional Judith Bourgeois of Mahone Bay died at the hands of her spouse in a murder-suicide. November 2007, Shelley Marie Smith of Cape Breton strangled and her body burned at the hands of her boyfriend. February 2008, 12-year-old Carissa Boudreau murdered by the hands of her mother. July 2010, Christina May Eisner of New Germany was shot and killed at the hands of her husband. March 2011, in Antigonish, Otilia Sharika was found murdered at the hands of her husband. In March 2011, Jason McCrae was charged finally for the murder of his wife, Paula Gallant. And who can forget, Madam Speaker, that it was in March 1982 when Jane Hirschman fatally shot and killed her husband, Billy Stafford, and ironically, in Bangs Falls, Queens County. Jane suffered 5 years of brutal abuse at the hands of her husband. Jane had almost 10 years of some peace and some freedom. Jane became an advocate, speaking up and speaking out, telling her story, fighting to end the violence against women. Unfortunately, Jane's voice, like Laura's, became silent, and Jane's life ended in violent tragedy, in a death that is suspected to be suicide. Jane's voice, like Laura's, may be silent, but their story and their life history continue to be told, and their lives will not be in vain. I am so proud of the members of our community in Liverpool, Queens, for coming together, raising their voices in support of Laura and her family. They're raising awareness and pushing our community in Queens to take the blinders off, to name the issue of violence against women, and to make change. And Madam Speaker, I am so proud of my government and the installation of Nova Scotia's first ever domestic violence court program, which is a part of the province's Domestic Violence Action Plan, which was released in December 2010. Madam Speaker, a key part of the plan is developing a specialized domestic violence court program to increase support for victims and rehabilitation services for their offenders. A domestic violence court, Madam Speaker, which is a pilot project, it will help the justice system work with our community partners to respond more appropriately to crimes linked specifically to violence. The pilot project in Sydney will offer victims and their children much needed services, and it will hold offenders accountable for their illegal behavior and reduce and deter abusive behavior in relationships. I want to remind all members that we need to continue to work together with community support groups such as Second Story, Harbour's House, Alice Housing, just to name a few. We need to work with our partners, such as the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women, the Departments of Justice, Education, Health, and Community Services. We need to ensure that men who abuse women are held accountable. We need to work together to remove the stigma, shame, take the blinders off of the face of violence against women, and we need to offer women in crisis, living in violent situations, courage, support, hope, so that they can begin to heal and choose change. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Order. I now recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the member for Queens for her most eloquent remarks. I was particularly impressed that you mentioned not just domestic violence, because I do believe we have this habit of sort of whitewashing what is primarily a man-on-woman crime. So to actually name what this is, I think was very important. And I think it was important to put some names to the anonymity that often surrounds this. But let's be clear. The vast majority of women in this province who are victims of battering will never hear their names. They lead lives of quiet desperation. I was particularly interested when you mentioned Jane Hirschman, because sometime, I guess it would have been in the 1980s, I interviewed Jane Hirschman, did a long interview with her for ATV, NASN, and I hadn't thought about Jane for a while, I have to say. But on to the Domestic Violence Action Plan. The resolution is, therefore be it resolved that the House commend the Department of Justice on the establishment of the first ever in Nova Scotia domestic violence court, which should begin to address the issue of protecting women against violence in this province. Recently, I was at a policy session, and a woman who had been away from this province for 20 years, we happened to be discussing spousal abuse, and she said, you know what, I've been away for 20 years, and I gotta tell you, nothing's changed. And so while we have this excellent plan, the Domestic Violence Action Plan, I do have a couple of caveats. And one of the things is, there's almost no money attached to this plan. When it was announced in December, that was the first thing that struck me. There was money attached to one recommendation, and that was it. And there were a lot of good items in here, action items, but there's no actual timeline for those items. So we are now establishing a court. It is a pilot program, and as we've seen in a number of departments, particularly education, and no disrespect meant to this minister because it's been going on for a long time. In fact, I suspect there are probably fewer pilot programs underway now in the Department of Education. There are all kinds of pilot programs that start, and they just remain pilot programs. They don't seem to ever, if they're successful, they don't seem to be adopted system-wide. And so, while this appears to be a good step, it clearly is not going to serve the whole province, and it is, again, only a pilot. If we look at the Domestic Violence Action Plan, it's a good thick document. There are 10 headings under new actions to address domestic violence. And under those actions, there's 10 major actions, there are 39 sub-actions. And I don't think we made progress on, there's been no identified progress on most of those. I do believe there is going to be an ongoing collection of first-hand experiences, which is not part of the new actions that was listed under Working Smarter Together. So I do believe that is going on. The other concern I have is that there was some very good work done on this Domestic Violence Action Plan. And it was done in conjunction with the transition houses, for example. But they tell me that they've been cut out of the implementation phase of this plan. So, you know, I have to wonder, why would that be? Why would we take the good work that was done by people who have first-hand experience in this particular area, and then say thank you for your input and not involve them in actually implementing the changes that need to be made? And if we look at, you know, and there are a number of, and for example, Avalon Sexual Assault Services is mentioned in here, but they haven't had an increase in their budget since 1993. And so I have to ask, are we really serious about combating this problem? When we look at some of the things that are being done, I believe the pilot, a neighbors, friends and family campaign, there is work being done on that. But to me, one of the big things is a communication strategy. What we do hear from women who are in abusive relationships is that they think if they contact a transition house, they have to leave. They think that picking up the phone and saying, I need help, means they're going to have to leave. And for many women, that simply is not possible. They can't make that step. So what we need to let women know, we need to have a communication strategy around letting women know that if you are being abused by your partner, by your significant other, you can still contact a transition house. You don't have to leave. And we're not doing anything on that. I really think that we need to be doing some advertising, and as I've said before, I don't care if the minister appears in the ads. I think that we need to let women know that there are supports out there for them if they are being battered and they don't feel they can leave yet. There are plans that they can make for safe exit strategies. There are plans that they can make for when an incident is occurring. And I don't think we're doing a good job there. And one of the 10 headings there was introduce legislative changes to better support victims. One of the sub-items is amend the Residential Tenancies Act. Well, we just did that last year, and this wasn't included. There was no reason why. Amend the Residential Tenancies Act to let a tenant sever their financial obligations under a lease if it is not safe for them to stay in their home because of the risk from domestic violence. There is no reason why that wasn't included last year. It should have been in there. A number of the things that we see in the plan would make a big difference to women. But again, because there's no timeline here, we don't know when these are actually going to happen. We don't know if they're actually being worked on. And the thing about a domestic violence court program pilot is it's billed in this resolution as that it should begin to address the issue of protecting women against violence in this province. Now, the thing is, once you're involved in the court system, that means that domestic violence has already happened in some way, shape, or form. And you may be going there to get a protection order, or you may be going there because there's been serious battering and there's an assault case or whatever. But it is not going to protect women. Change in attitude will protect women. We need to do work with children, with teens, with young men. We need to make sure that our young women understand what an appropriate relationship is and that kind of thing, because I'm afraid that today what our young people are exposed to in terms of what of relationships, if they're watching videos, I don't think they understand what an appropriate relationship is, or there are some who don't understand because they see women acting as accessories to men, and there's certain kinds of music that are violent, that have violent lyrics, and we seem to accept that. So while I commend the government in starting this pilot, it is a good first step. I think we need to be aware that we have a long way to go, and there is much, much more to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it really is a hard subject to get up and to speak about here. And I want to congratulate my colleague from Bedford, Birch Cove, on her words, but especially to my colleague from Queens, because I believe she is right, Madam Speaker. I don't think this is a debate. I think this is a discussion that's long overdue, and it's a discussion that should never be put on a shelf. It is a discussion that has to be ongoing and one that we keep at the forefront so that we can try to deal with this problem. There are so many people whose lives and families are affected. And a lot of times, the individuals that are involved blame themselves. They think it's their fault that they're being abused. They bring the blame on themselves. And then they find it hard to reach out and ask for some help and assistance because they think they've brought this on themselves and they're ashamed to go and look for help. So what we need to do as people in this House is we need to find a way to let them know that there are people that care. I would be willing to say, Madam Speaker, there is not an individual in this House whose family has not been affected by some type of domestic violence. And although we don't speak about it, we have an opportunity as members of this House to try to do something to improve the situations. Now we say, how do we do that? Well, I've got a saying that I like to use on occasion, and it's a little like eating an elephant. You eat an elephant one bite at a time, and you're going to affect change to this issue one step at a time. Is a court in Sydney a pilot project enough? Probably not. But is it a good step? Yes, Madam Speaker, it's a good step. And from that, hopefully we as legislatures in this province will learn what needs to be improved so that we can take that program and expand it across the province and make sure that more people have access to that program. Now, there are many things that we as government, regardless of what side of the House you sit on, don't do right. But you can never fault anyone for trying to do something for people that are in need. And people who suffer from domestic violence, it's not just them. It's their family, it's their extended family. There are so many people that are affected, and we don't see it. Many times, we take and we look at the broad picture and think, oh, they look like it's a great thing going on. And we don't know how much the families are affected. So, you know, we have had tools in the past like transition houses who provide a valuable service, who do so much with so little, and who need our support as members of this House. We have we need to be able to find a way to reach out to these people that are involved and infected, and we have to help work on their self-esteem so that they feel that they are somebody that is worthy, so that they feel that there are people out there that care about them. So when the member from Queens said, this is not a debate, I give her full marks for that, because it's not a debate. It's about working together to find a solution to a problem that has plagued Nova Scotia much, much too long. Madam Speaker, I cannot add any more to this conversation that's already been added by my two colleagues. But I want to say that it has truly been an honor to be part of this discussion. And I hope that we all in this House had the courage and the foresight to move forward, to bring domestic violence in our communities to an end. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, and I'd like to certainly thank all members for their thoughtful comments in tonight's late debate. And the House now stands adjourned to meet again tomorrow at noon. Thank you very much.